Hello everyone, this is False Wine Reads here, and today I'm here to talk to you about Midnight Tides by Steven Erikson. Now, my copy is pretty messed up, but don't let that perturb you too much, because this is probably the best Malazan book. Now look, I may like Toll the Hounds just as much, but like structurally, narratively, like all the fundamentals of what makes a good novel, this book hits. So I should stop and explain. This is reviewed after a year. I didn't get around to reviewing them after I had read it, or like remotely after I had read it. It's been a year since I've read this book. So that may color my opinions of it, right? I might forget some things, but from what I remember, and this book has stuck with me. It is my favorite Malazan book. It is one of my favorite fantasy books ever. It is just so amazing, and that's because this is almost an anti-fantasy book. Now, okay, I just want to preface this. I usually kind of cringe and reel back when someone is trying to prove to me why this is like this thing is actually going against completely like whatever, it's like this is an anti-movie. It's like, no, it's a movie, but this is a fantasy book. But it specifically, in the start of this book, it sets up expectations and like tropes, and then I don't want to say it subverts them or intentionally, but it will set up stuff, and then it'll like not undercut itself, but undercut the trope, and it'll be like, no, that ain't this type of world. Whereas, for example, I don't have any of the books there; they're all on my shelf. But for example, in Genabacchus is pretty standard fantasy fare. Like for Malazan, it has city-states where like parties can go to rest, and it like adventurers guilds, and like it's pretty standard stuff. And then you have Seven Cities, which is more of like adventures, like it's Dune but fantasy, and it's adventures in the desert. There's the Path of Hands and stuff, and then you get to Lethri. And Lethri, the setting of this book, is it's misery. It's pure, unfiltered, the worst place to live. Well, okay. The worst place of the Book of the Fallen to live. Because essentially due to... now, I don't know if this is in this book or in book 7. So, spoiler alert for this book and everything up to book 8. There is an ice spell curse that Gothos cast on this whole land. There was a war between the Kachanchamal and the Tist Edur and the Tist Andi, and the Kachanchamal lost, and the Tist Edur or the Tist Andi were betrayed. So the Tist Edur are the only ones who survived. And during the time of the First Empire, and let's see if I can get this right, Decimabacchus? I don't know. Decimabacchus. Anyways, the first emperor, humans colonized Lether, what became known as Lether. And so they set up, there's indigenous peoples, obviously on Lether. There are indigenous peoples. But there are also people, remnants of the First Empire there. And that is what forms the Lethri kingdom that we meet in the beginning of this book. Their like royal line, I don't want to say is unbroken, but it's still going strong from the days of the First Empire. And then you have the Tist Edur, left over from those ancient wars with the Kachanchamal and the Tist Andi, who have lost their connection to their Anomander rake-like figure of their culture and their civilization, and are now kind of, I don't want to say wandering aimlessly, but they're slowly dying out as most, I want to say most of the simpler lifestyles. Because in Malazan, there's a lot of stuff with indigenous peoples and their cultures that are simpler I say that in quotation marks because that's not the full story. That's a very oversimplification. But for the sake of, a YouTube video about this book, a simpler culture. And their culture is dying out in favor of the Lethri culture of wealth and greed and overconsumption. Lether is very, very America coded, to me at least. I saw a lot of, like, I don't want to say pot shots at America. It's capitalism in general, but who is the figurehead for capitalism in the modern world? It's America. So, of course, my brain automatically went to America. Greed is a very big theme in this book. It is something that the Lethri kingdom just runs on inherently. There is... So, getting down to the brass tacks, right? This book is about two sets of... It's about families. It's a family drama set in the clash between a kingdom, like a developed kingdom, and a tribal people. And it focuses on two families. It focuses on the Sengar family and the Bedict family. And it involves the battle between the brothers, or the brothers like wills, essentially. You have Hulbedict, who is the outcast from Lethri after seeing the horrors that the kingdom does to the indigenous people it conquers. You have Bryce Bedict, who is aware of the horrors of the kingdom. At this point, it's the kingdom, but is still willing to work with the royal family to protect the royal family. And you have Tehol is a unique case. He got really rich and then squandered it all. So right now he's living in a very cramped apartment, so cramped that he has to live on the roof, or wants to live on the roof, with his manservant named Bug. And these three are opposed by the Sengar brothers. Trull Sengar from Book 4. And... Okay. Sorry, I just had another point that I'm going to save for later. So Trull Sengar, Fear Sengar, and Ruald Sengar. Rulad. I'm going to call him Rulad. Rulad Sengar. I'm going to put this book down now. And those three brothers, they kind of... There is Hulbedict, who... Okay. Let's test. I think Hulbedict is the oldest. Tehol Bryce? I don't know. I don't know that for sure. But I do know that it's Fear Sengar, Trull Sengar, and then Rulad Sengar. And Rulad is kind of... He's unblooded. He's untested, which means in the Adur culture that he is a child. And even though he is, like, trying to prove his worth, he can't, because there's no current wars going on. But when the Warlock King, which Warlock King is such a good title, but when the Warlock King, good thing there is a list of names at the beginning of each of these books, else I would be lost. Okay, let's see if you can find it. Hanan Musag. Hanan Musag, I'll call him Hanan. Hanan Musag, the Warlock King, wants to go get a sword that has something to do with the crippled god. We meet Withal in this book, which Withal is yep, okay. So in the prologue, Withal makes a sword, who was an important character later on in the series. And the sword is a tool for the crippled god, and we don't know what the tool is for, but Hanan Mossad wants it for himself. He think it'll enable him to elevate the Adur over the Lethri in some sort of way. So he sends the Sengar brothers out to get it, and in this, Rulad gets a hold of it and is cursed by the crippled god with resurrection. Basically, every time he dies, he is inevitably sent back to life, to his body. His soul is sent back by the crippled god. I don't know how the mechanics would work, but he's definitely just being like hiding his death from Hood, transporting his soul directly to the crippled god, who then sends it back. Anyhow, I think that's how it works, but who knows for this stuff for sure, right? And that is this is like the catalyst that basically, so the sword is the catalyst for war. Well, on the Lethery side, there's greed, obviously, which, I mean, that's kind of just the whole Lethery way, is greed. And during all this stuff, Tehol is undermining the structure of the kingdom. You gotta remember, it's kingdom now. Kingdom, by essentially hoarding all the money. And, well, it's not money right now, I don't think. He's hoarding all of this assets and wealth and, like, basically all the money. And eventually he's going to collapse the kingdom by just flooding the market with, like, all of this stuff. Hyperinflation, essentially. And it turns out that his manservant is the god Mael, the elder god Mael. And we also get introduced to another elder god, the Errant, who is, because of the ice spell that's been placed, he is essentially free to do whatever he wants because they still worship the elder gods here because the ice spell was placed that long ago. Now, the reason why I say this is an anti-fantasy, I guess it's not an anti-fantasy. It's more just, it's a different, it's a fantastical version of a, like, Shakespearean tragedy, almost. I don't know. Tragedies, you can get into a lot of detail, but, like, to me, it's like, it's pretty tragic, this whole story. With Rulad and anyways, with all the stuff that happens in it. And take Featherwitch, for example. Now, Featherwitch, Udanas is a slave of the Sengar family, as is Featherwitch. Or Featherwitch, I think, anyways, Featherwitch is also a slave in the vicinity of Udanas. And Udanas is presented as, at least how I interpret him, was like, you know, slave, zero to hero, slave to savior, you know, type thing. And Featherwitch was going to be the one he saves, the one he lifts above the rest. But in reality, at least I read Udanas as like 30 years old, and Featherwitch is stated to be like 18, basically, I think around 18. And so it comes off as a bit creepy that he's crushing on her, and we're in his head hearing about how this really young, like, really young lady, I should say, woman, is like, just it's a bit gross. And then when he does save her, she's like, what the hell, I didn't ask to be saved. You just took it upon yourself to make a decision for me. And that's, you know, later on. And she, I don't know if it's, she at least gets consequences, like beaten for his actions. And just horrible. And in book 7, that's more a book 7 thing, but like, her character arcs, all these character arcs are set up to be like triumphant and up and up and up, and everything just keeps going down and down and down. It gets worse and worse and worse. And the only bright spot in this book, I say only, but like the major bright spot in this book is Tehol and Bug. That's why they work so well, is because everything else is so dreary and dark. It's not dark in like a grim dark sort of way, but it's dark in a it never stops raining sort of way. Like, it's always gloomy out. It's always gray skies and like a chill, an unnatural chill to the air year round because of the massive amounts of ice surrounding the place. It's just gloomy, and it's like, that's what I mean by anti-fantasy. That the things that should work out for characters work out either wrong or don't work out at all. And it's just so condensed and tight. Like, whereas it's still big. This copy is actually kind of, I don't want to say inflated, but it's like, it's a bigger copy than just the little mass markets. Not by much, but it still is like just bigger in size. So it looks more intimidating than it is. This isn't even 1,000 pages long for like the actual story. But I lost my train of thought. Uh-oh. It's condensed. Okay, I found it. It's condensed. It's a tight package. Stuff matters. It's not something that it's not a foundational text in the series. It is not filler, but it fills in those gaps that we needed. It gives we see the Nascent and like learn about that, and we learn about the Adur, who are going to be so important going forward. Well, so important as like how they work with the crippled god's plans as we try to figure that out. We learn about the Lethri, which it's going to be very important going into book 7 and book 9 and forward. We learn about the situation in Lether, at least like this half of the continent. It's just, this book is a lot of good while also serving the series really well. And Trull, I like Trull. Trull in book 4 was good. By the end of this book, I loved Trull. Like, Trull Singar, even though he wasn't my favorite part of this book by himself, left probably one of my favorite characters. Just like seeing him not try to fight how he is, but like realizing that while he was kind of not looking, society has been changing around him. He realizes society's been getting poisoned. It's good. Am I missing anything? So I talked about Featherwitch, Ujanas. Oh, you know what? You know who's cool? Kurokan. He's cool. He's Seda. He's the Seda. I liked him. Saren. Oh my gosh, Saren Padak. She's cool. She's cool too. She's a good character. But since I'm running out of things to say, I guess that is where I'll leave it off. I absolutely love this book. It's tied for my favorite book in this whole series. And for a long time, it was my favorite book in the series. Thank you guys for watching this video. I appreciate you sticking to the end. If you stuck to the end, leave a like, subscribe, and have a good day. I'll see you. Bye.